We deal with game theory now. Why do we need to study game theory? Game theory is usually related to players, but it can be applied to business context also. When we look at a business, there are several competitors with which the business or an enterprise or a commercial entity is competing with. That means it is similar to one player is playing with all other players on the other side. So here the players have to create their own strategies to win in the game. So in the game theory we will come across certain kinds of terminology which just we'll see now. Game is a play where people are on the opposite sides and each of them will have some strategies. Anyhow, we'll see that. If there are two persons playing the game, and that game is a two-person game. But if one person's gain is equal loss to the other person or other player, then we call that as two-person zero-sum game. Because say a person has got 6 points, that means that is a loss to the other person, which is equal to -6. 6 minus 6 is equal to 0. That is the reason we call that as two-person zero-sum game. And when we are trying to put the values in a table, say we have two players, let us say player A and player B. Likewise, we can see this matrix. In player A and player B, player A have several strategies, A1, A2, A3, A4, and player B has B1, B2, B3, B4, B5. 5 strategies are there. A have 4 strategies. And there is no such hard and fast rule that A and B should have equal number of strategies. A may have 4 strategies, B may have 5 strategies, or A may have 4 strategies, B may have 3 strategies, likewise. So if A is playing A1 strategy, B is playing B1 strategy, whatever the outcome, that means the number of points gained by A is given at the intersection of this A1, B1. Similarly, when player A is playing A1 strategy and player B is playing B2 strategy, the intersection of at these points we have some value which is a gain to player A, which is equivalent loss to player B. Likewise, we have for all the strategies, all the possible, we have some elements. So that will form a matrix or table. So that table is known as payoff matrix. But one thing we need to remember is all the elements in the table are representing gains to player A, but whereas those things are losses to player B. This is a two-person zero-sum game. And then when we are trying to solve these problems, we try to see, we try to apply some principle known as Maximin Principle and Minimax Principle, likewise. So what is Maximin Principle? While solving a game theory problem, when a matrix is given, we try to find out the minimum element or lowest element in each row and write down on the side of the matrix, which we call that as row minimum. In each row, first row we go through and identify the lowest element in that first row, then we'll write down there, that is row minimum for that row. Then we'll go to second row, we'll identify the lowest element and then we'll write down beside that matrix. Then third row, fourth row, fifth row, whatever the number of rows that are there, we write down on the right side of the matrix under row minimum. Similarly, after that is over, then we'll proceed to column operation or column wise. We go to first column and write down what is the maximum element or highest element in that first column, we'll write down. Then second column we'll see, we'll write down. Third column we'll write down. third column also we will say and write down the maximum element from the fourth column. Whatever the number of columns are there, we try to identify the highest element of each column, and we will write down below that, which we call that as column maxima. We had row minima earlier, now we have column maxima. Then we will see how we are going to use that while solving the problem. So what we try to do is, among the among the row minima values, we identify the maximum value and mark that with a box, right? So and similarly we identify the least element in column maxima, we'll mark that with a circle, and we'll see whether both of them meet at the same place. So in case if both of them meet at the same place, we call that as a saddle point, which is the value of the game or which is the solution. That means actually what we are trying to do in writing down row minimum, A is trying to find out in strategy A1 what is the lowest gain he can have irrespective of the strategy followed by player B, because A doesn't know, player A does not know which strategy is going to be adopted by player B, because the strategy adopted by B is not in control of A. B may adopt B1, B2, B3, B4, B5. Among these things, which is the worst kind of thing that can happen to A, that is the reason he has identified, or we have identified row minimum. So among them, whichever is the highest value, we have marked that. That means A wants to identify a strategy which will give maximum of minimum gains, because we have written down in row minima all those are minimum gains for each of the strategy when he follows, player A follows. So here Maximin principle, what it means is maximizing the minimum gain, because we have written down all minimum values, among them maximum one we have chosen. A wants to choose that strategy. And in case of mini-max principle, player B has noted down what is the maximum loss that can occur when he follows B1 strategy, B2, B3, B4, B5, Bn, whatever that is there. He tries to identify, because A strategy also is not under the control of player B. So then what he tries to do is what is the maximum loss that he can incur when he is playing, when he is adopting each of those strategies. And he will try to identify the minimum element among these column maximas. So he is encircling that or marking with a circle. He wants to choose a strategy where he can minimize the damage or minimize the loss. If both of them are meeting, that we call that as a saddle point. Then optimal strategy. By using this mini-max and Maximin principles, both players wants to identify an optimal strategy. So that is how B wants to minimize the damage or minimize the loss. A wants to maximize the gain or profit from the or payoff. We also call that as payoff during that play. Similarly, value of the game is given by that saddle point if that exists for a table, because we know we also have the games without saddle point. So in that event, games with saddle points are easier to solve, because it is simply identifying the row minima, identifying the column maxima for each of the rows and each of the columns, then highest among the row minima and lowest among the column maxima are to be identified and marked, and where they meet, that will be the saddle point, which is also known as the value of the game. It is much easier. But when it comes to games without saddle point, we have other strategies which we call that as dominant strategies.